So we recently heard that Democrats got together without Republicans, and they removed the public option from healthcare reform, which now I'm just calling it healthcare stagnation. I don't see any reform here. That has to be influenced by lobbyists and the lobbies for insurance companies, right? In what situation could you have just Democrats get together and remove the public option? I don't understand.
It must. I'm not familiar with the details of that situation. I work on healthcare is not one of my fields of expertise, but I think you're right that it was in response to some political pressure, right? It was in response to some political capital. What was that capital? I'm not sure. It might be healthcare lobbyists. It also could be a constituent organization, or it would have to be a national constituent organization. But that change was in response to some political pressure, and somebody brought political pressure to bear, and that's what I do at the Art of Politics, is I help bring political pressure to bear on issues that are important.
Do you agree that in many cases the influence of lobbies can actually put people in a worse economic situation, or put people at risk in certain cases? When we talk about healthcare, there's lives at risk here.
Yeah.
There's many lobbies that are working from the point of view of some who would say that they're taking an objective view. Obviously, you have people on both sides. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of risk to having power in the hands of lobbies as well, is there not?
When I moved back up here from Washington, D.C. 4 years ago, I started the Art of Politics because I saw a real need for government affairs consulting in specific areas, and those areas are nonprofit organizations and small to mid-sized companies. Nobody needs more people on K Street. We don't need more $500 an hour lobbyists with $10,000 retainers. That's not where the market is, and that's not where the good is. But those $10,000 an hour retainer lobbyists are in people's faces all the time. And I think it's our duty, and maybe it's because I'm a librarian's daughter, I don't know, but I think it's our duty to make sure that more voices are heard.
Have you had any work that you turned down or removed yourself from, or relationships that you cut off, professional relationships, because you thought you were getting into something that was possibly unethical or illegal? Obviously, without giving us names, unless you want to, I wouldn't write them down or anything like that. But we hear about so many of these situations where Jack Abramoff and so on and so forth. Have you ever come across these types of things where you said something here doesn't seem like it's on the up and up?
The requests that I get from my clients are really specific, and that combined with the fact that the regulations to be a lobbyist, you can't just go around saying you're a lobbyist, is what I've determined. You have to register and be properly registered. You have to make lots of disclosures about that registration. So the specificity of the work I do for my clients, I'm not just going somewhere and asking for everything. I'm going to a specific person and asking for something to be included in a bill. That combined with the registration process makes me very comfortable with what I do. When
we talk about many promises are made with politicians when they're running for office, and then afterwards, there's many times one of the biggest complaints is, well, either number one, I don't like the promises they made that now they are legislating based on, or number two, they didn't keep the promises they made. And I guess it depends on what side you're on, how you would feel about that. Where do you see this kind of tradition that has been created in terms of the promises that are made that later have to be carried out, whether it's, and lobbyists are very much at the center of it, whether it's politicians or whether it's nonprofits or organizations. Mm-hmm. How can that be avoided? Number one, this idea of the quid pro quo that has become the standard. And number two, is there any way that it could be made so that it doesn't put people kind of not at the forefront, the voters not at the forefront of the decisions?
I would turn that around, actually, and tell you about my experience with my clients. And one of the things that I tell my clients, if you're an elected official, for every hour that you have face-to-face with a constituent, there are 20 people who want that time.
And that seems low even.
That's a low estimate. That's like an average between your local city councilor and your state senator, or your U.S. senator. Can I move this thing a little to the right?
Go right ahead.
I got this thing
anywhere
right
you
in
need
the
to
middle
put it.
of you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what I tell my clients is, so elected officials meet with a lot of people, and they hear a lot of promises themselves. They hear that this organization is going to do this, and that organization is going to do that, and it's not often the case that those results actually happen. So elected officials officials become very cynical. So what I tell my clients to do, one of the techniques or one of the things I make sure is that if they're going to talk about a subject, that they are deeply knowledgeable about that subject and that they're able to answer every question that an elected official might have. So if, for example, you want to go ask somebody to build swing sets in your inner city, you better know everything there is to know about swing sets. Now, you can't control an elected official's what they promise they're going to do or not do. You just have to kind of make sure that your side of the street is clean. That's my approach to it.
But so I hear you saying that I think a lot of our listeners are going to have trouble accepting that it's the public officials that should be the cynical ones because promises are being made to them, right? I mean, a new study came out, I think we're going to talk about it later, where the public perception of different professions, the only one lower than a politician is a car salesman, and a used car salesman at that. So I think it's going to be a hard sell that it's actually the politicians who are being promised stuff and they are the cynical ones, is it not?
All I can tell you is my experience. And my experience in legislative affairs is that always, whether you agree with the elected official or not, they always want to do good for their constituents. And you might disagree with them about what that good is. You know, they may not want swing sets in their urban city. They may want something else. But their intent is always to do good. And
is it always? See, I feel sometimes it's to do the best they can for themselves.
Really? How so?
Well, that they're acting in the interest of what will get them the most, whatever, power, fame, money. I don't know that it's always in the interest of the constituents.
These two things aren't mutually exclusive, though, because a lot of time doing good for their constituent is what's going to get them what you've described.
But taking the trips and things like that are
that's just gross.
That's different, right?
Yeah.
So let me tell you a story. Actually, there was a guy I met a year and a half ago or so ago. His name's Horace Cooper. He is he's an annoyingly conservative Republican. He is one of the few African-American Republicans. He did not vote for Barack Obama. I met him at a talk radio conference and we got to talking. Very, very nice guy. And we started talking about all of the different things he's involved in and the different groups he speaks at. And he has this great house and so on and so forth. And I said, I don't really understand who pays this guy and what exactly his job is. He came on the show a couple of times. We find out a few months ago he's been indicted. What has he been indicted for? Well, he was involved in a quid pro quo with Jack Abramoff, our good friend Jack. Everybody knows Jack Abramoff. How do people get sucked in? Jack Abramoff may be kind of a unique example because of the reach that his power had and the number of people and how charismatic he was. But the average person, like our good friend Horace Cooper, how do they get sucked in by some of these intermediaries that are working? They may be claiming to be lobbyists or PR people or whatever, and all of a sudden get into situations where indictments are being handed out. How does it happen?
I don't know how it happens. All I know is I sleep well at night.
How would you guess it happens, though? Knowing kind of how your exchanges go with your clients and that's not the way that it goes.
Yeah.
Could you imagine a way where all of a sudden you would get wrapped up in something like that? I mean, if you had to guess, how might it happen to people? Not specifically Horace, but...
I'm sure Horace is a very nice man. I'm not trying to dodge a question. I can't imagine doing something that I wouldn't be comfortable disclosing on an electronic document that goes to the Secretary of State's office, which is what I have to do.
Which says what you've been doing, who you've been talking to, that type of thing.
If I in my private life, if I donate to a campaign, I have to disclose that. So. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to dodge something.
You just don't know.
I just don't know. I mean, I look at people, I do the same thing you do. I look at Abramoff and I'm like, he could have made so much money legitimately in DC doing what he does. Why did he do that? Why did he go beyond? And I don't understand it. I'm not saying I'm a saint or I'm better than they are. I just don't know what would compel somebody to so clearly go beyond rules and regulations.